Welcome to Farm's weekly Wednesday webinar series. This series is brought to you in part by a grant from the Otto Bremer Foundation and Farms. We grow farmers. Hello, everyone. My name is Connie Clevin, and I'm the administrative assistant here at Farms. I'd like to welcome you to today's Wednesday webinar, Growing Transplants. I have just a few notes before we begin our webinar. We will begin promptly at noon each Wednesday, but invite you to access the webinar recordings as many times as you wish, even after each week's offerings, if you miss a week or are late to arrive. You should receive an email with that link when they are uploaded each week. If not, please contact us and we can direct you to that library. There's a few housekeeping notes. All participants will be placed on mute during the presentation so we may all better hear the presenter. If there are any handouts, they will be available to download at your convenience. If you have questions during the presentation, use the chat box in the lower part of your screen to ask those questions. We will ask your questions as time allows and as they are asked. We will not go over our allowed time as a courtesy to those who have to go back to work. Please fill out evaluations after each webinar as they are vital to future funding for our project as well as programming our sessions. I will now turn the webinar over to our presenter for today, Sue Balcom, and I will let her tell you a little bit more about herself. Hello, Sue.
Hi, Connie. Thank you, and Merry Christmas. Wow, do you know this is the last webinar from this fall's webinar series? It seems like just yesterday when we had the idea to reach out and do some training. So I wanted to remind everybody before I got started that we have our new list of classes up on our website at www.farms.org. You can sign up for those individual classes. If you want to pass this time, you need to contact Connie at the office and she will give you a password that you will be able to access all 16 of those classes once you pay your $100 fees. So we're very excited about this project and we have some great new classes lined up. And today we're going to talk a little bit about starting your transplants and your garden. And I know it's only December, but I got seed catalogs in the mail and they are gorgeous and I just can't wait to get outside. So I am the executive director of Farms and we've been having just a wonderful time this year trying to grow more farmers. So hopefully you'll get something out of today's webinar that you'll be able to use yourself in your own farm or garden. So I will begin. Thank you, Connie. A couple things we're going to talk about today are keeping journals and garden maps because that's an important part of planning your garden. A little bit about how seed selection works as far as reading a seed catalog. They are beautiful. They're becoming more beautiful all the time as more people begin to garden. I got one called Good Seed the other day from Baker Heirloom Seeds. Oh my gosh, there is not enough dirt in the world for me to plant all of the wonderful things that I want to grow. And I'm so excited. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can read a seed catalog and make your own selections. And then we're going to get into starting those plants from seed once you get those seeds in the mail, which I plan on making my orders here in the next couple of weeks because I can't wait to play with my seeds and my journal. I'm going to talk a little bit, I think, about soil preparation, but mostly when to plant, because that's really important. If you're growing your own transplants, you need to prepare them or plant them so that they're ready to rock and roll when the weather turns nice, but you also have to be able to maintain their health in the event that we have a crappy spring like we did this year. First of all, I keep a garden journal, and I have for years and years and years. Some of them are more complete than others. When I first started learning about gardening, I've been gardening my entire life. I am currently a master gardener, but I probably need to do some master gardener hours to keep that certification. However, most of those things I'd already known because I watched my mom, my grandmother had a garden, I dated a guy that had a garden, and eventually just always had my own, whether it was in a tiny little bit of strip of property between a sidewalk and a house that I rented, or whether I had just a tiny little plot big enough for tomatoes and peppers, or now where I'm actually farming a couple of different areas. I have my garden at home with raised beds. I have two plots at a community garden. and I have a hoop house. So we have lots and lots of things, and I'll be able to experiment a lot with my seeds this year, and I hope that you will also give that a try too. But your journal is very important because it keeps a record of many things. And I always tell people that these journals could become extremely important to future generations if you're recording things like temperature, snowfall, maybe pests and pestilence and plagues, and sunrises and sunsets and all that kind of stuff that we take for granted, but is really good reading for some historian 100 years from now. It doesn't have to be a fancy book. It can be simply a 3-ring binder. I have one really cool journal. I always look for them when I go to Barnes and Noble. I look in their like not discard pile, but their sale piles where you can get books sometimes for $1 or $3. They have some really cool and unusual journals. I have one that I snagged that has pockets in it, little tiny pockets for keeping things. And I'm a seed saver, and I am a leaf collector, a rock collector, and sticks and old bones, that kind of stuff follows me home. And we keep it on the windowsill, and every once in a while I'll open one of my journals, a bunch of really awesome dried leaves will fall out, and so it's whatever you want to make of it. You could use a 3-ring binder with pockets. You can use a regular dollar notebook from the dollar store. Mine are getting so fat I have to almost tie them together because I save all of my seed packets. I take photos of my plants. We are going to offer a webinar on taking good photos of your farm in the spring of the year. And I take a lot of photos of my garden in its various stages, individual plants. I put photos in the journal. I put all my seed packets in the journal. I write notes next to those seed packets. I have killed off seeds invariably by experimenting once in a while where I shouldn't be experimenting. But if you keep good notes on all that stuff, you won't do it again the next year, provided you take a look at your journal from last year, which I would highly recommend. Keep photos and or squished bugs and other pests in that book. You want to, one year I had a one-horned tomato caterpillar, and he was just ugly as, oh my gosh, I was just shocked when I saw him. All they do is sit on your tomato plants. They're big and fat. They eat them and they poop green. And yeah, I kind of like drown it in the river, but not before I took a couple pictures of it because I wanted to keep a track of the fact that I had that one and only one pest in my garden. So you can write comments and notes. When I garden with my grandchildren, I make them write in the journals. It's just a good habit to get into. And I love ladybugs. So one of the things that you keep in your journal is a map of your garden. There is software like www.plangarden.com that you can use when you're planning your garden. But this is what my maps look like. This was done in May 27th, 2010. I kept There's my fence up there, my carrot row there, my tomatoes are here. I picked something here on July 16th. I planted something on June 3rd. I think these were 2 types of beans. There was a yellow bean and a Gita bean, and these came up very thin. Here I have a 20-foot fence. Red stripe something or other was planted here. Oh, red stripe and Hutterite squash. I did kind of some trials for NDSU, and that was one of the reasons why I have these like 10-foot rows of plants, because that's how they send you the seeds and ask you to keep track. I had onions over here, sunflowers, potatoes, melons, another fence with peas and green peas, and then a couple rows of corn. So you keep track of where you plant this, and it always helps to put north, south, east, and west so you know that you're in the right area when you're looking at your map. Because then the next year you certainly don't want to plant your tomatoes where your potatoes were or where your tomatoes were. You want to rotate those crops. And I think we have a little, I have a little map later on that will kind of tell you what sort of vegetables are in the same family and how they should follow each other in a small rotation like in a garden. One of the things that's helpful to know if you're planning to grow your own transplant is your hardiness zone. And you know, with global warming, climate change, or just the progression of the years, and the earth is getting older like we are, our climate has definitely changed. I can notice it big time because we're actually warmer. We can grow a little bit earlier in the spring and a little bit longer in the fall, even without season extension. So you can see the map of North Dakota as half green, excuse me, half blue and half red. So zone 4 is kind of where I live along the Missouri River. And zone 3 is the northern tier up there, which we've often joked should go back to Canada because their weather there is just so much worse than ours. I live along the Missouri River, so in addition to being in zone 4, I also have a microclimate created by the Missouri River. Before you plan your garden, like let's say you don't have a garden at all, you want to take into consideration a few things like how much light it gets, how close tree roots and septic tanks are to your garden plot, and also your skin is very sensitive to the microclimates in your yard. So if you go outside and you walk around, you will find pockets in your garden or in your yard that would make a perfect garden because they might be warmer than other places in your yard. And you can go out and test that for yourself, but definitely you can tell with the river next to us that we get rolling fog a lot of times in the summertime, and it's cooler because the wind comes off the water from the south, and it cools as it comes across the water and then up the hill and over my garden. So next summer I also get a hefty south wind that blows a lot of sand over my soil. Next spring we're going to actually use something called it's not remade, it's coolaroo, and it's like a shade cloth, but it'll keep the wind down but still allow the sun to come over the top of the garden. And I'm going to see if that doesn't help the wind whipping my little plants around, which they aren't very happy about that when they're young. So okay, so once you order seeds, you will get on a list, and on that list, once on that list, you will always be on that list, and you will get tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of seed catalogs. I have a stack of foot deep, but it is the early bird that gets the worm. And so the 3 seed catalogs that I get in December are usually the ones I order. I also order seeds from a local seed grower, the Podol family in Fullerton, North Dakota. They have added a bunch of new varieties. Their seeds are bred for this area up here. They are prolific and hardy and vigorous growers, and I absolutely love to use local for anything I do. And so I think you should check out Prairie Road Organic Seeds. You can find them online, or you can email me and I'll tell you how to get a hold of them. Now you will see to your right as you're looking at the screen the seed catalog here, Totally Tomatoes. In addition to tomatoes, they have peppers, and I'm a crazy pepper grower. I like hot peppers, I like ornamental peppers. I will try any kind of pepper that I can, as long as it falls in or close to our growing season, which typically, if you're under 75 days, you're doing pretty good. The Fulgia jalapeno hybrid right there has little leaves next to it. That symbol indicates those plants are available. Now I grow my own plants because I just love to do that. So this is a 65-day jalapeno. What that means is that it matures in 65 days. That falls under that 75-day seasonal length that we have here in North Dakota. So this is a variety that would probably grow quite well for you. They kind of will tell you what it's good for. Sauces, salsas, stir fries. This one is not very pungent or hot. It looks like a jalapeno, but it's hybrid, so it's not quite like biting into a super hot jalapeno. It tells you that it's a very flavorful pepper in spite of the fact that it's not hot. The plants grow to be 27 inches tall, and they have lots of thick-walled fruits, measuring about 1 3/4 inches wide at the shoulder, and they mature from green to red. And they are beautiful when they're halfway between green and red also. Now, you will hear this more than once. I have a tomato called Black Crim that has wonderful flavor. But I gave a plant to my brother, and he grew these tomatoes, and he never ate them because he didn't think they ever got ripe because they had black shoulders. And I explained to him that that was perfectly normal. And so when your plant, the shoulder of the plant is the part directly below the stem that connects it to the plant. And that's same way with this jalapeno, that it has wide shoulders, it tapers off down to a little tiny point, and they were really good, and they were very prolific growers, as I can remember without looking at my notes. Now, it will tell you can order a packet of 20 seeds. You'll see that it's a pretty pricey seed at $2.45. But you can get 2 packets, or you can buy them by the ounce. And I don't know how many jalapeno seeds there are in an eighth of an ounce, but I don't think seeds weigh very much, and these are teeny tiny seeds. And so that would be an awful lot of jalapeno peppers. Once you get the packet of seeds, which you will see on the left here on this screen, it has pretty much identical information here. There's 20 seeds, there's the name, it's green to red, it's a heatless jalapeno that grows in 65 days. Then it gives you some planting instructions and its scientific name. It says here that you should start your seed 6 to 8 weeks prior to planting outdoors. Now, one thing about peppers is they do not like cold. They don't like cold ground, and they do not like cold nights. So I always start my peppers at least 8 weeks before they go out in the garden. They're a little easier to manage. You know, they don't get so big so fast. Sorry, they don't get so big so fast, and then that way you can keep them in the house until you absolutely have to plant them outside. Now, I know a lot of people will do things like use wall of waters and low tunnels, and then you can maybe plant them earlier. But I found that for the most part, by doing that, if you plant your tomatoes in March and they don't like cold weather, then you're out there babysitting them all the time. They will catch up. Trust me, they will catch up to everybody else's if you wait till the proper time to put them in the dirt. So you want to start these seeds indoors 6 to 8 weeks prior to planting outdoors. Now, I think, and I don't know if that's next here, but we'll talk a little bit about when that is later. Now, peppers will take a long time to come up, and they need a lot of heat. So what I do when I'm growing pepper transplants is I will put them in their little cells, and I will turn on the light in the oven, and I will put them in the oven. Now, as long as you do not turn the oven on, top or bottom, you will not run into trouble that I had, where I actually killed off some pepper seeds because I cooked them. You don't want to do that. But it really stays warm and moist inside of your oven, and as long as your family is okay with not using your oven or checking it before they turn it on, that's the best way I've found to germinate those pepper plants. So here is kind of like when you're selecting seeds, here is like a bean comparison chart. I don't know what else to call it, because there's bush beans and round beans and pod beans and green beans. And so here are the variety names: Provider, Fresh Pick, Foremost, Jade, and Easy Pick. These are the days that it takes to mature to actually get fruit off the plant, the color, the pod length, the diameter. This is disease resistant. So your hybrids sometimes come with, okay, a hybrid plant has been bred or crossbred with a like plant that might be more disease resistant, so that it takes on those traits but still keeps some of its own. You cannot really seed save a hybrid plant and expect to get that same plant again the next year. But there's nothing wrong with using hybrids. They sometimes are bred to grow faster, to be disease resistant, you know, to get all kinds of different sorts of traits that you wouldn't normally have. And right here we have, these are resistant to bean mosaic, downy mildew, powdery mildew, anthracnose. I have no idea what anthracnose is. I don't think I've ever had it, but I will let you know if I ever do, and then we'll decide what to do with it. Here we have seed colors. I know that Teresa Podal has bred a bumble bean, which is a two-colored bean that is just like totally awesome. It's a lot of fun to grow beans. It's a lot of fun to dry them. We do a lot of pickled green beans. So of course we would look for a steady, a bean plant that would actually continue to produce so that we could continue to pickle for a long, long time. In selecting your seeds, seed catalogs will also give you more information, like this information about growing. It gives you kind of like an idea about what kind of soil your plant likes. It will tell you to use an inoculant. You only will find that on things like beans and peas. And what it is kind of a nitrogen, because they like a lot of nitrogen, and it will kind of like help them along in the beginning. You should always start to pick your beans when they're a good size for you to eat or use, because your plant will continue to grow more to replace the ones that you pick. Don't think that you got to leave them on there till the exact 65 days is up. When it says here about diseases also that you want to, I never I pull my most of my plants out of my garden. If you have a diseased plant and you claw that under, you're going to get that disease is going to spread. So you might not want to do this. Now here it says to practice a 3-year crop rotation. You will notice that people who grow commodities will actually corn on one side, soybeans on the other field, then they'll switch those around because corn and beans complement each other that way. The Mexican bean beetle here, they tell you you can use those chemicals on there. I've never had trouble with Mexican bean beetles. I think that one of the advantages to gardening in northern climates is that while we maybe have to work a little harder to get some things to grow, we have fewer pest problems up here because we don't have the heat and humidity. Here again it says to regularly harvest to encourage a new pod set. Your plant is growing those beans for seed. That is how it will reproduce. So when you take away its reproductive rights by picking its beans, it just kind of like hurries up and tries to make up for that by growing more. So you both benefit. Here is, you remember when I told you that you could buy seeds by the ounce? If you're planting a pound of seeds, you can get 175 feet, row feet of beans out of a pound of these seeds. Now in a package here, a 2-ounce package, it tells you have 175 seeds, and that will sow 20 to 25 feet. So if you're growing a garden and you only want 20 feet of beans, you only buy 1 packet of seed. Cucumbers, that would be one of those things that you do not start indoors. They like warm soil, they like lots of moisture, so they won't germinate outside until your soil temperatures are warm enough. But if you grow them indoors and they become root bound or they run out of places to grow, they will just completely stop growing. So do not start cucumbers indoors. Here again is information about picking and, you know, putting them in a greenhouse, and then how many seeds you need to plant your garden. So when you're looking at your garden and you're like, I want 2 10-foot rows of cucumbers, I want 3 10-foot rows of beans, you'll want to buy your seed according to that. So that's another reason to keep the journal and to make those notes so that you know whether, let's say some of your seeds didn't germinate very well, you might want to try another variety. Plants that should be started indoors are the ones that take a little longer to come to fruition, that they're slow to germinate. Like I said, peppers take up to 2 weeks to actually germinate. And then tomatoes require a longer season. Of course, lately our seasons have been long enough to accommodate most tomatoes, but it's still so much fun to grow them indoors. I would highly recommend it. When you grow your cold weather crops like broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower, you will start them also, but you will start them much later than you will your tomatoes and your peppers, because these can be set out earlier, but you don't want them as large, and they come up really quickly by comparison, so you can get them out in your garden. I've started many herbs. Stevia is one of my favorites to grow, and I only grow it because it's a challenge. The seed is about the size of a pinhead, and a lot of people have a lot of problems with those really small herb seeds, but for some reason They just grow for me. I would recommend talking to them. That might help. So what you will need to start your own transplants is a good soil mix. And it's getting harder and harder to find a good soil mix anymore because they put those stupid little diaper beads in there and it collects water, and it's just not a good thing. You don't want your soil to hold water. And even for your houseplants, I tell you what, I never use that stuff for my houseplants either. I've lost more plants to root rot because of that soil retention miracle grow potting soil than anything. I like to mix my own, but finding just regular soil without anything in it is really becoming difficult. But you will need a good soil mix, or we're going to mix our own, which I will talk to you about, with vermiculite in it. Then your seeds, that's up to you. You'll need some containers such as milk cartons, peat pots, plastic trays, recycled materials, planting trays. I recycle my planting trays and I buy them after the fact when they're on sale for half price, and I ask people if I give them to them that they would return them to me, and they last a good long time. You need light. You need lots and lots of light. That's very, very important. And it needs to be warm, and it should be consistently warm. Now, your lights would help. If you're using light bulbs, that will help keep the heat, but you really need to use fluorescent lights, one cool and one warm bulb, and then that is um, very similar to natural light. You need water, but you have to be careful when you water. I collect water before. I like really hot water to do dishes, so I will take a jug and I will run water into my jugs and fill them up for my plants, and then when it's hot enough, I'll fill up my sink for dishes. So that way, A, I'm not wasting any water down the tubes, and B, it sits in the jugs and the chlorine has a chance to evaporate, and then it becomes room temperature, which your plants will really appreciate. You do not need to fertilize. I don't do a lot of fertilizing in my garden or out of my garden. Like Uncle Eddie says, we feed the worms, we don't fertilize. The seeds contain everything they need. They're a complete little package to get that plant growing. Now, let's say you do save seeds, or you found some old seeds a long, long time ago in your grandma's garage and you want to plant them. Before you do that, you really want to check old seeds for germination. So what I do is, like, these are squash seeds, and so I put 10 seeds in a wet paper towel. You remember this from school, where you germinated beans or squash seeds and grew a little plant. And so just wet a paper towel, and I use those. I recycle like a strawberry clamshell or whatever, and wet the paper towel, put the seeds on it, close that up, put it in a place that's dark, and let it go. When those seeds start sprouting, count them. If 5 out of your 10 germinate, you'll have a 50% growth rate. So that means you should probably put 2 seeds in every space just to make sure that one of them comes up. But here, these seeds, which I think were a Hidatsa squash seed, I had 100% germination because all 10 of them showed signs of life. Yay! So I'm a seed saver, so I know they weren't old seeds. They were probably seeds I saved. Here is a chart that I hope you will come back and take a look at that will kind of recommend when you should plant your seeds based on your frost date. Now let's see, do we go into frost date? Oh, our last chance of frost is usually like May 30th, somewhere in between the 20th and 30th of May. It's kind of like our last frost date. I never push it. Well, okay, sometimes I push it. But if you're planting broccoli, it says 5 to 7 weeks before that date. Well, broccoli can be planted and can survive a light chill. Not a hard freeze, but it can survive some cold weather. So you need to think carefully about maybe not starting those 5 to 7 weeks before the frost date, because you want to get them out a little earlier. And some people can't do that. That's one of the reasons I have raised beds, because I can go out and plant a bed as I want. I don't plow them up. They aren't, I don't wait and have someone come in and rototill up my garden. I plant it a row at a time according to the weather and how I'm feeling and what plants I got in the house. And that way there was one year when we got in the garden in March and I had radishes. The second week of May, we were eating radishes already because it was just perfect weather for radishes. So I went out and planted some. Lettuces are another thing that you can plant. Kale, eggplant, that's a warm crop. Cucumbers are. So here it says you can plant cucumbers ahead of time. It just, if you may want to do it a week so they germinate in the house and you know how many plants you're going to have, that's fine. But it's really not necessary. But just remember to keep this in your journal so you don't start them too early or start them too late to give you a good crop. Another reason to keep a good journal. Now, there are two ways to start seedlings, and one of them is to put a bunch of little seeds in teeny tiny little rows very close together in flats. And then once they germinate, I use a wooden skewer for making shish kebabs to lift those plants out. I grab the leaf and I insert the pointy end of the stick next to the root and gently lift them out and transplant them. You don't want to touch their little delicate stems. They don't like that very much. And if you squeeze it, you will hinder its ability to pull up water and food from the soil, and then it will for sure die. Or you could skip that step and, there's 72 plant cells trays that you can buy, and you can put one seed in each of those cell trays. My problem is when something doesn't come up, then I either put another seed in there or I transplant another plant in there, and then pretty soon I got 45 different kinds of tomatoes or peppers in one tray, and I'm trying to avoid that this year. I'm going to do a little better job of that. So you might want to put 2 seeds in each of those cells or peat pots to make sure that they grow. You want to cover them lightly with soil and tamp them in so that they make contact with the soil, but don't give them pressure. They don't like to be squeezed. Cover with plastic wrap to keep moist. Keep them warm. You can use heat mats that you can buy, or you can put them in the oven like I do. And then immediately when you see signs of life, you need to get them out of the dark and under ample light. And I put light on mine for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, until I know they're going to survive without that nighttime light. And what the heck, it doesn't ever really hurt them anyway, so sometimes I never turn those lights off once I have plants underneath them. But this is a common problem that people who grow plants, they aren't paying attention, they don't get them in the light soon enough, they get tall and spindly while they're looking for light, and then they flop over and die. Not the plant's fault, your fault. You're in charge of light. Here are a couple of my adventures in planting in pots. I have those little square pots here with basil in the lower left, and then I have the larger, I think they're 1.5 to 2 inch peat pots that I put tomatoes in. But way in the back you can see some green and funky rusty looking pots. Those pots are rolled with paper, and newspaper, old newspaper biodegrades much faster than these peat pots. I found these square peat pots a year after they were planted in the garden, whereas newspaper, bam, it's gone several weeks after you put that into the garden. They just do not decay as quickly as newspaper. This is a nice sized seedling that can be transplanted from a flat into an individual pot. As they grow, you want to give them more room to grow. And so if you plant them too early, pretty soon you're going to have them in 8-inch pots in your house and you're not going to be able to manage them. So you got to really plan this out. These are those little pellets that come really tiny and you put water on them and they puff up. Sometimes I end up with those things just because I'm buying trays for myself and they come with the trays. I don't use them very often. These are, by the way, tomato plants. Here's something that happens that everybody that's not careful about growing transplants. It's the dreaded damping off. It's absolutely horrible. And it comes from several different things. So what you want to do is absolutely be sure and use sterile potting soil. If you reuse your containers, your tools, you want to sterilize them with soapy water and then rinse them off in a solution of 1 part chlorine bleach to 9 parts of water, and then allow them to dry. I do this every year. I use a little bit of bleach and I wash everything that I use. You want to absolutely take those covers off that come with those automatic transplant starting kits, or that plastic wrap. That's why you need to watch for that germination, and the minute you see signs of life, you get them out from under the plastic and into the light. You can also help the damping off. You'll see what damping off looks like. You'll get a shriveled little stem there at the soil line, which is one of the reasons you don't want to touch that stem, but rather transplant those babies with the leaves and a stick. Keep air moving around your plants with a small fan. We have a ceiling fan. And do not overwater your plants. You need to keep them moist while they're germinating, but once they start leafing out, you have to be careful how much you water them. And you don't want that stupid soil that keeps water on the roots. You want good drainage. So make sure you got holes in the bottom of your pots. Before you plant them out in your yard, you're going to have to harden them off. And hardening off is simply putting them outside and kind of like getting them used to living outdoors instead of in the house. So what I do is a couple weeks before I plant my plants or give them away, I put them outside in the shade for a couple hours, and then I bring them in, especially if it's cold at night. And then now I have a hoop house that I plan on moving my plants out into the hoop house. We can roll up the sides during the day. We can roll them down at night. They'll be much happier out there, and I will be too, because I get a lot of exercise moving those trays in and out, and have been known to dump a tray once in a while, which is really depressing, to kill those plants that you worked so hard to grow. So just put them out gradually, get them used to the outside. Breaks in temperature, you want to withhold water from them. Not too much that they're going to croak, but it kind of like plants will develop resistance to diseases and drought conditions and other things like that if allowed to. They are very flexible, but you need to be careful that you don't like overcook them. You'll sunburn them if you see white spots on the leaves. Then they were out in the sun too long, and they'll usually recover unless they're totally fried. So I'll put my plants out and I will give them water in the morning, and I'll let them dry out, and then I'll bring them in the house. So back and forth, and making sure that they're happy and not too windblown. Allowing those seedlings to wilt is kind of a way of strengthening them also. So that's why I water them, I put them outside, they'll dry out and they'll look limp and horrible, and I'll feel bad for them. But then I'll bring them in the house, and I'll give them a little bit of water. And so this is another one of those things you could do to help harden them off. Now, I do have a video. I don't know if I have enough time here. It's already 1:45. Goodness gracious. A YouTube video that shows you how to roll your own plant pots. Let's get that right. You're rolling pot plants. You're rolling pots for plants, whatever. So you can roll your own. If you want to, there is the link to that YouTube video, or you can email me and I will send that to you. Remember, when you're going to plant your plants, you want to put them in a good place where they get lots of sun. They want healthy soil. They need to water, and you need to be able to have access to that site. I'm not going to go into the soil preparation, but just remember, I think Tom Kelb told me that if the weeds are growing in the dirt, it will support life. There's nothing wrong about planting a garden in bad soil. You can learn how to improve that soil. If you have carrots that grow like that, your soil is really hard. So, but there are ways to improve your soil by composting, using mulch. Do not do too much digging or cultivating, and adding other kinds of soil amendments. So our frost dates here in zones 3 and 4 are May 15th through the 31st, or the 1st through the 15th, and in September, the first week or the last week, depending upon what part of North Dakota you live in. And I wanted to get to that, and here is a little bit of a guideline for when to plant. Lettuce, spinach, radishes, potatoes, onions, peas, carrots, and beets don't mind a little cold weather. So as soon as you can get out in your soil, that's when you want to plant those. Definitely wait till your soil has warmed up to plant tomatoes, peppers, squash, pumpkins, beans, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, and cucumbers. Companion planting, there are books written about companion planting. What I call that is diversified planting. It confuses insects. So if you plant plants, many different varieties together, you'll have a funky looking garden, and it will serve many issues. It'll serve to like ward off issues with pests. It also, like they say, if you can eat it together, like peppers and tomatoes are really good eaten together, so they like to grow next to each other. Just make sure you're not shading anybody out by growing a taller plant with a my pepper plants got a little shaded out because it was a good year for cucumbers this year. But yeah, what the heck, it was a good thing. And just remember, companion planting can be used more as an art instead of a science. Oh, I wanted to totally get to this. Nightshade plants, mustards, legumes, squash. You want to kind of like pay attention to what common garden vegetables are in these families. Nightshade, of course, are your potatoes and tomatoes. Mustards are broccoli, cabbage, those kinds of kale, squash, and legumes are beans and peas. You know what parsley, onion, squash, and spinach are, and then all others. So the reason you need to know that is so that when you rotate your garden crops, you're following with a beneficial crop. Here are a couple examples of really nice looking raised beds before and after. I just love when my garden starts to look like that. Here's a book from Rodale on companion planting. Carrots Love Tomatoes is another one that I have. And of course, everybody's probably heard of the Three Sisters planting that the Native Americans did. Those were companion planted. They were nutritionally beneficial, or they made a complete nutritious meal as well as grew together, corn, beans, and squash. So here's a rotation. Your beans can follow your root vegetables, can follow your fruiting vegetables, can follow your leaf vegetables, and go around. So even in a small garden like this, you still should rotate your plants according to this chart. And on that note, here is a beautiful photograph. I don't think this is my garden, but that's kind of what my raised beds look like. I'm going to end it here. We are running out of time, but just know that we will be doing more webinars, and you can make requests as to what you'd like us to share with you. Contact us at www.farms.org or email me at sbalcom@farms.org. Are there any questions out there in question land? Oh, hearing none, I wish you all a merry, very, very Merry Christmas and happy gardening. Don't forget to contact us if you need any information about planting or growing transplants. We're here to help.